today with members of the Congressional Black Caucus, each of whom have hearts and minds. And I know that we will hear soon from Congressman John Lewis, under whom many of us were tutored, along with the late Dr. Martin Luther King. We're advocates of nonviolence. We are students of protest. But we also, as our hearts are broken, as I mourn with my fellow Texans for the loss of 5 dedicated law enforcement officers who now have mourning them, their families and children and community. They died in the line of duty. And as members of the United States Congress, I've watched my colleagues fight for justice and equal treatment for all. And they've cried over the bodies of those who've been lost in gun violence. And as we've watched the protests that have gone on and those that will come, America should know that those protests were nonviolent. They were crying out for action. They were crying out in pain. But I never heard one person talk about an attack on law enforcement officers or undermining the laws of this nation, for we are a nation of laws. You will find that the movement that many of us were involved in, the protest movement, the violence came toward us. We did not offer any violence. So today we stand here answering the call of leadership. Each of these members will go home to their district. They will seek peace and understanding, but they will respond that there must be action. And so as we mourn the loss of those fallen last night in a criminal terrorist act of killing 5 officers, the largest since 9/11, we mourn Mr. Castile, we mourn Mr. Sterling. And we mourn all of those, and we ask that the nation sees us as leaders of peace. We're asking the Speaker of the House, we're asking the Majority Leader to now realize that an AR-15 does not discriminate. It finds itself in the hearts and the bodies of many that we love. And so we're calling on the passage of no fly, no buy. We're calling on the passage of closing the loophole, but we're calling on a passage of bringing together police and community, the Law Enforcement and Integrity Act. We hope that there will be roundtables of discussions between police and community, and that we'll be in the midst of those discussions calling upon peace. And then finally, let me say, we cannot do this without resources. Resources for police, resources for young people in pain, resources for community. We are fighting for monies that are needed to bring our communities together. I'll join with Congressman Conyers on the Judiciary Committee to fight for legislation that will respond to the needs of police and respond to the needs of community. My heart is broken, and we will pray this weekend in Houston, marching for peace, nonviolence, and the action of the United States Congress to take violent guns and violent people off the streets of this nation.
Thank you, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. The Congressional Black Caucus.
Start by saying that our hearts are broken. I indicated that we would hear from our conscience of the Congress, John Lewis. Many of us are students not only of John Lewis, but Dr. Martin Luther King. And in his letter from the Birmingham jail, he told us to leave our places and to fight against injustice. It should be very clear, and we should repeat it again. We are praying for the families of those fallen officers, and it was a terrorist act and a mass shooting. We are brokenhearted and sad. But it should be very clear that this violent perpetrator using an AR-15 said that he was not affiliated with any group, that he came out of hate and anger. And what we're saying to you is we are among these young people. And I want to call the name of DeAndre. He's a big young man, 6'5". He was out last night in the Washington protests. As a mother, as I watched those children welcoming the fact that somebody cared about them. When we finally reached the White House, this young man broke down on the ground. He was so overwhelmed that he had been able to lead John, like you did as a young man, nonviolently. And all he said to us was, Terry Sue, do something. He said, no fly, no buy. I was so impressed that he even knew those words. But he fell on the ground. I think America needs to use us as leaders of unity. We want to do that, to be unified, and to be as much a unifying force for law enforcement officers who are serving their nation, and for those young people who have seen the loss of life and are praying for action from all of us. We are going to do that, and I think we can do that if the nation listens to what peace and nonviolence is and listens to the call of Dr. King and John Lewis that we must fight against injustice. It was not Black Lives Matter. It was a person intending for violence.